This is the analysis of the pitching biomechanics of Jack Hammond. Jack threw fastballs and changeups from the windup during his evaluation. His ball velocity and joint forces and torques will be compared to elite high school pitchers, while his joint motions or kinematics will be compared to elite adult pitchers previously tested at ASMI. This evaluation provides recommendations based on previous research at ASMI of proper pitching mechanics. However, these changes should be made under the supervision of a certified pitching coach. If any arm problems present themselves after making the recommended changes, please consult your pitching coach, medical staff, or ASMI prior to continual pitching to prevent injury. The tables on each of the following slides will show the variable of interest as seen here on the left, the range for elite high school pitchers' fastballs as seen here in the middle, and Jack's data as seen on the right. During this evaluation, Jack threw an average of 71 miles per hour for his fastball. As an introduction to the data tables as seen below, if the value of Jack's data is white, he's within the range of elite pitchers. However, if the value is red, he's outside this range. To begin this analysis, we'll start by discussing Jack's shoulder and elbow flexibility. This table shows Jack's external rotation in both arms, shown in the first and fourth lines of the table, and his internal rotation in both arms are shown in the second and fifth. Lastly, Jack's total range of motion at his shoulder is shown in both the third and sixth lines of the table. The point of interest when looking at all these numbers is Jack's lack of external rotation flexibility, specifically in his dominant shoulder. Overall, it is recommended that Jack works with his trainers and therapists to increase his shoulder external rotation. Additionally, it was determined on the examination table that Jack was lacking elbow extension in his throwing arm. When looking at the table below, we can see that Jack was lacking around 30 degrees of extension. As discussed during his evaluation, this is one area that Jack needs to continue working on after having surgery. Now, after discussing Jack's limited flexibility in his shoulder and elbow, we will see how this affects him dynamically during his pitch. We will begin by discussing Jack's shoulder external rotation. Shoulder external rotation, the amount Jack's forearm is rotated back, can be seen by this angle here. Maximum shoulder external rotation is one variable that is most directly related to ball velocity. The more maximum shoulder external rotation a pitcher can obtain while cocking the arm back, the greater the distance they have to accelerate the ball forward to a higher velocity at release. When looking at the table below, we can see that Jack is below the elite range, meaning he has less time to accelerate the ball forward, and is not able to pass as much energy to the baseball. If he were able to reach back further to fall somewhere within this green shaded region, he would have more time to accelerate the ball forward and would ultimately improve his ball velocity. However, Jack's ability to cock his arm back further may be a direct link to his lack of flexibility, and again it is recommended that Jack work to increase this measure. Next we'll discuss Jack's elbow flexion. Elbow flexion, the amount of bend in Jack's arm, can be seen as a smaller angle between these two red lines. Typically at the point of ball release, we see elite pitchers extend their elbow so that their elbow flexion angle is somewhere between 19 and 29 degrees, indicated by this green shaded region. And when looking at the table below, we can see that Jack is above the elite range with 34 degrees. This limited amount of elbow extension at the point of ball release also affects his maximum elbow extension velocity, as seen here. If Jack were able to extend his elbow further, this would allow a larger distance to accelerate the baseball, thus possibly increasing his ball velocity. To correct this measure, it is recommended that Jack continues to work on regaining flexibility in his elbow after having surgery. The next variable we'll discuss is Jack's knee flexion. Knee flexion, or the amount of bend in Jack's knee, can be seen as a smaller angle between these two red lines. Knee flexion is important for storing energy in the muscles of the legs and transferring that energy up the kinetic chain. At the time of foot contact, we can see that Jack has landed with his knee bent to 38 degrees. However, now when we look at the time of ball release, we can see that Jack maintains roughly the same amount of knee flexion at this point, and when looking at the table below, we can see that his knee is now bent to 41 degrees. In order for Jack to pass more energy up his body, it is recommended that he works to actively extend his knee through this point of ball release. The last point we will discuss is Jack's transfer of energy using his kinetic chain. The kinetic chain is a transfer of energy from the ground up the body to produce ball velocity through a sequential rotation of the body segments. In a pitcher, this starts in the image of the left at the time of foot contact. They absorb energy in their lead leg and transfer that energy up to their pelvis and hips. An elite pitcher will then rotate their pelvis, reaching a maximum velocity reported in the table in degrees per second, creating stretch in their core muscles between their hips and trunk. They then fire their shoulders, referred to here as upper trunk rotational velocity, cocking the arm back and transferring that energy to their throwing arm, as seen in the image in the middle. The pitcher then simultaneously internally rotates at the shoulder and extends at the elbow to transfer this energy to the baseball. An efficient kinetic chain requires that the timing in which these rotations occur is in sequence, so this table also shows the time of maximum pelvis and maximum upper trunk rotation velocity, with time reported as a percentage of the throw. Here, 0% represents the time of front foot contact, and 100% represents the time of ball release. It can be seen when specifically looking at the rotational timings that Jack does not have the proper amount of separation, or in other words, he is rotating his pelvis simultaneously with his upper trunk. Overall, it is recommended that Jack work to actively fire his hips prior to his shoulders to create more trunk separation. In summary, the first items that were discussed in this evaluation were Jack's shoulder and elbow flexibility. It was determined that Jack had limited shoulder external rotation and elbow extension in his throwing arm. These limitations were first noted on the examination table, but they also carried over dynamically during the pitch. Overall, it is recommended that Jack continues to work on gaining flexibility in his throwing arm. The second variable that was noted was Jack's knee flexion. It was determined that Jack did not extend his knee through the point of ball release. Overall, it is recommended that he works on actively extending his knee to transfer more energy up his body. Lastly, when assessing Jack's transfer of energy using his kinetic chain, it was noted that his pelvis and trunk rotated roughly at the same time. To create more separation, it is recommended that Jack works on firing his hips while keeping his shoulders square to the target. Overall, Jack has some good aspects to his pitching mechanics. However, there are a few changes he can make to reduce his risk of injury while improving his performance as discussed throughout this presentation. After Jack has had time to implement these changes into his mechanics, we would recommend he come back to ASMI for a re-evaluation. A complete list of all of Jack's data can be found in the biomechanical datasheet. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at 205-918-2119.